Many fans view Korn as one of alternative metal's most influential and game-changing bands. And while it's an impressive reputation in the annals of rock music, the band also had to go through dark episodes, internal struggles, and personal demons throughout its career. In the mid-90s, Korn created a genre called nu metal and pioneered the next big trend in mainstream rock music after grunge. They were on the forefront of the alternative metal boom in the early 90s to early 2000s, paving the way for bands like Limp Bizkit, Deftones, P.O.D, System of a Down, and Linkin Park to break into the mainstream. But by the mid-2000s, Korn started showing signs of deterioration behind the scenes, leading to the exit of two of its founding members. What's the story behind the rise of Korn? Keep watching as we explore the history of nu metal's progenitors, the demons that plagued the band and almost tore them apart, and how they solidified themselves as one of alternative metal's most important bands. Formation and debut. Korn is a band that needs no introduction. With their dark, heavy, and often introspective sound, they quickly became one of the most influential bands of the late 90s and early 2000s. But their success didn't come easily, and the band members had to overcome many personal struggles to achieve their iconic status. Korn was formed in Bakersfield, California in 1993 by lead vocalist Jonathan Davis, guitarist Brian Head Welsh, and James Monkey Schaefer, bassist Reginald Fieldy Arvizu, and drummer David Silveria. The band's name was initially Creep and consisted of Monkey, Fieldy, Silveria, and a different vocalist. Later, they recruited Head and Davis to the group and changed their name to Korn, which was meant to represent the group's unique, twisted sound. Davis is responsible for designing the Korn logo, which they still use today. In 1993, the band recorded its first demo, Niedermeyer's Mind. Consisting of 4 tracks, the demo is arguably the first ever nu metal recording displaying the band's unique sound. A year later, Korn released their self-titled debut album. It was a critical success, with its blend of heavy metal, hip-hop, funk, and grunge, is noted by critics as the birth of nu metal. Accompanying the album's aggressive and different sound was its dark lyrics, most of which were penned by Jonathan Davis. The album's lyrics talk about topics such as bullying, substance abuse, and child abuse, which would often be covered on subsequent Korn albums. The album's closing track, Daddy, featured Davis singing alone in a darkened room and descending into legitimate tears while recording. The track is about child molestation and is viewed by many as one of the most disturbing songs ever. Following the release of their debut album, the band began to develop a loyal following. But it was their second album, Life is Peachy, that gave Korn their first steps toward mainstream success. The album peaked at number 3 on the Billboard 200 and included the hit single Adidas, which became a radio and MTV favorite. Its first single, No Place to Hide, garnered the band their first ever Grammy nomination for Best Metal Performance. Mainstream rise. Following the supporting tour for Life is Peachy, which included an appearance at Lollapalooza in 1997, Korn returned to the studio for their third album. Follow the Leader was released in August 1998 and debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200. It's considered by many as the album that launched Korn at the top of the mainstream alternative scene and caused the nu metal explosion of the late 90s. 2 of its singles, Got the Life and Freak on a Leash, became so popular that its music videos were the first to be retired on MTV's Total Request Live. In short, they stayed for so long in the top 10 that they had to be honorably discharged. The music video for Freak on a Leash was awarded Best Rock Video and Best Editing at the 1999 MTV Video Music Awards. It also got Korn the Grammy Award for the Best Music Video in 2000. Follow the Leader is Korn's best-selling album, but despite the success, the band's personal issues were on full display behind the scenes. Korn revealed in 2013 that they had excessive amounts of booze, drugs, and women in the studio while recording the album. Davis in particular was under the influence of Jack Daniels, meth, and coke during the album's recording. Around the time of the album's release, the singer got himself cleaned up and has not used meth ever since. But his newfound sobriety led to a heightened sense of anxiety and depression, which worsened with the death of his grandfather at the time. Years later, guitarist Head revealed that Davis was on the verge of taking his own life during this period and needed to be monitored. Nonetheless, the band's success continued with the release of their 4th album, Issues, in 1999. Much like its predecessor, the album debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and featured hit singles Falling Away From Me and Make Me Bad. The album showcased Korn's continued evolution as a band with more complex arrangements and a greater emphasis on melody. Turmoil in the mid-2000s. At the turn of the millennium, tensions started to boil between the band members. At one point, the band considered firing Fieldy due to his own addictions, but the band got themselves together and released their next album, Untouchables, in 2002. The following year, they released their sixth album, Take a Look in the Mirror. Unlike the late 90s when their albums were selling highly, Korn's first two albums of the 2000s underperformed commercially. Additionally, Head became dangerously addicted to drugs and relied on them to prepare himself for live shows. Take a Look in the Mirror ended up being Head's last album with Korn until 2013. He departed the band shortly before the recording of its next album, See You on the Other Side, after becoming a Christian and ridding himself of his addictions. After the release of See You on the Other Side in 2005, it was drummer David Silveira who followed in Head's footsteps, exiting the band the following year. In 2007, Korn recorded its next album, an untitled one featuring guest drummers Brooks Wackerman and Terry Bozzio. Even Davis contributed drum parts on the record. It's the only album where Korn did not have an official drummer, and also the only one that featured 3 official members of the band. Joey Jordison of Slipknot was brought in as the band's touring drummer during their supporting tour for the album. By 2009, Korn had found its new drummer in Ray Luzier. Once again a quartet, the band released their next album, Korn 3 Remember Who You Are. The album featured a return to their nu metal roots, as well as the return of producer Ross Robinson, who produced the band's first 2 albums. For their next album, The Path of Totality, the band collaborated with dubstep artist Skrillex and came up with an album that was heavily inspired by the new dubstep style. While it was a fresh creative direction for the band, the album split fans and critics. Some enjoyed the new sound, while others thought Korn was simply piggybacking onto some new trend. Return of Brian Head Welsh. After 7 years, former guitarist Brian Head Welsh reunited with Korn on stage at the Carolina Rebellion Festival in May 2012, performing the song Blind. It was initially a one-off, and even Head's appearance with his former bandmates was an on-the-spot decision, but it eventually led to his return to Korn in November that same year after a nearly 8-year absence. The band's 11th album, The Paradigm Shift, was released the following year and debuted at number 8 on the Billboard 200. The album marked a return to Korn's classic sound, and it received positive reviews from critics and fans alike, with Head's return to the band being warmly welcomed by Korn's fan base. With the classic lineup minus David Silveira intact, Korn continued being productive even as they approached middle age. They released their 12th album, The Serenity of Suffering, in 2016, followed by The Nothing in 2019 and Requiem in 2022. However, before the release of their last album, the band announced that Fieldy would be taking a hiatus to deal with personal issues. Currently, Korn continues to tour and is already preparing for a new album while Fieldy takes care of his personal stuff. Although the band is entering their 30th year together, fans and critics have responded positively to their latest releases, with many calling them some of Korn's best work to date. And from the looks of it, even though these new metal legends are aging like everyone else, they still have a lot left in the tank.